Okay, so Andrew Tate's back in the news. I thought that was interesting to go and see. And let's go ahead and look this up. This is very interesting. I've been talking about Tate for a while, and I think that he's something that is worth talking about, even though people don't want to talk to him. So Andrew Tate is in Florida right now. Ron DeSantis is causing quite a stir about this. So, story from NBC News: Ron DeSantis antagonizes, that's a strong word, MAGA supporters by going after Andrew Tate. The Florida governor quickly made it clear that Tate, the social media figure popular in some right-wing circles, wasn't welcome in the state. Let me see if we have a quote here. Tate announces that he's leaving, irrelevant, etc. Trump Jr. called Tate buddy, apparently. That's hilarious. Alina Habba was she was their attorney, actually. That's something that is also involved with this. But Andrew Tate has been causing quite a stir among the MAGA movement recently. And this is a big division. Benny Johnson had him on the show, I think a couple of weeks ago. The Hodge twins, I believe, had him on the show a couple of weeks ago as well. This is whether people want to talk about Tate or not, this is it's an important story, and it's something that we should talk about more and more, that we definitely do. So I've heard a lot of things about Tate. I wrote about him. I've defended him a couple of times. I have not defended him a couple times. And as we're getting more and more information coming in about Andrew Tate, I think it's very important to see why the discussion's happening on the right. And I think I was having this conversation with Hafiz Bayoku, my friend, who has a great live show on YouTube. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. I've talked with my friend Gabriella Cipriano about this. I've talked with a lot of other people about Andrew Tate, a lot of men, for instance, and mostly just because Tate is the person who resonates most with that demographic, and obviously that person is going to be a young man who's looking for guidance, who has been failed by a lot of these institutions in the past. And I think really the answer that we're looking for here is just that Tate is not the answer, because no single celebrity is the answer. Donald Trump is not the answer, by the way. I hope I made that clear in my opening monologue. He's not a savior. Jesus is the only one who saves, for example. So we want to get that clear. But I actually thought the most interesting point about this was a point that Delano Squires made on Jason Whitlock's show a couple of weeks ago. And I think this is the central divide in the American right about Andrew Tate. So there is a pro-Andrew Tate American right. There's an anti-Andrew Tate side of the conservative movement. And I think that the divide is simply, it's about like Tate isn't enough of a conservative, or Tate is just kind of being targeted by the left in all these ways. He's actually very similar to Trump in that way. And I think the point that Delano Squires made, I thought would probably make Andrew Tate very, very upset if he read the thing that Delano said or listened to the clip that Delano said, was that he compared him to Gloria Steinem, which I thought was very, very interesting. So Gloria Steinem, for those who don't know, is a very, very famous feminist thinker, writer. She was one of the most influential people in the second wave movement in the 1960s about kind of, what women should be, kind of, you need a man like a fish needs a bicycle, all those type of things. That was all her. And so I thought Delano's point was interesting, because what he said was that that's essentially the same thing that Andrew Tate is right now. And Gloria Steinem was one of the deadliest people to ever touch American conservative politics, American traditional values, because she decoupled marriage from obligation. She decoupled men and women. She kind of created this adversarial component to feminist politics by integrating sexuality inside of it, and which is essentially what Tate is doing. Andrew Tate is saying that marriage is a scam, have multiple wives, multiple children. Elon Musk has said this too, which is also why Elon Musk is causing quite a stir, which I agree that he's right. And I think that the conclusion that I've come to on Andrew Tate is that essentially how I view him now, and I've thought about this long and hard. I wrote about him in Toxic Immaturity. I've made YouTube videos about him. I think Andrew Tate is a Trojan horse. And here's what I mean by that. So the Trojan horse, for all of those who don't know, and shame on you for not knowing at this point, because it's such a widely used analogy, the Trojan horse is an allegory, I should say, to the Iliad, which is the ancient old epic poem by Homer about telling the story of the Trojan War. So basically, the Greeks invade this island nation of Troy, which is very famous for being the patron city of Apollo. So they're very skilled at archery. Apollo was an archer in the Greek mythology. And they have this very big wall around their city that no one has been able to breach. There's been a lot of people that have tried to conquer the city. There have been a lot of people that have tried to pillage the city. They're a very wealthy nation. They're a very wealthy country. The Greeks at this time that were led by Agamemnon were conquering everybody inside of that part of the Mediterranean Sea. And he wanted Troy very, very badly. So he went and drove the biggest armada ever assembled in modern Greece to go and conquer the city. And he brought along this guy named Achilles, who you guys probably have all known, Achilles' heel, all those type of things. Odysseus, who would later be the star in the Odyssey, which is Homer's other famous poem, which is being made into a Nolan movie. Thank God. I've been wanting an Odyssey movie for a very long time, at least a good one, a modern one. So, good luck to Christopher Nolan on that. But essentially, what happens throughout the epic poem and throughout the story of Troy is that the Greeks try over and over and over and over and over again to breach the walls, and they can't do it. So essentially, what happens is they, quote unquote, leave Troy. They leave Troy, and they kind of steer the boats away. They steer the boats off the shore, and they leave this offering, quote unquote, of a horse. Because a horse is the animal of Apollo in a way. He's kind of an associated, kind of archetype of the Apollo spirit that is descended upon Troy. And they leave it for them on the beach. And the Trojan army and the military, this is after, Achilles has killed Prince Hector by this point. This is after, all of things are kind of getting settled back in the kingdom of Troy. And they see this horse, and the Trojans, in abstract, were very, very religious people at this point. They were very, very loyal to serving Apollo. So they thought that this was a gift from the gods, from Apollo, for, quote unquote, defeating the Greeks. And so what they did was they dragged the horse, this wooden horse that was kind of made into an effigy, and they dragged it inside of the city. And so they kind of burned sacrifices to it at this point. It was a very paganistic religion. They kind of, just threw a bunch of festivals for it. They said, oh my gosh, you beat the Greeks. Look at all the favor that has been shown on us from our gods, all the things. And what actually turned out to happen was that Troy would later be conquered by the Greeks, because all the Greeks did was they put their best soldiers inside of the horse. They let down the gates of Troy. The rest of the army stormed into the front of the gates, and they raped and pillaged the entire city, razed it to the ground, instead of Aeneas going out and carrying the sword of Troy with him and creating what would later be Rome, at least in the mythology from that perspective. I don't know if there's any historical accuracy there or not, but that's the story, and that's what I think the Andrew Tate phenomenon represents. Andrew Tate is a Trojan horse. Andrew Tate is a Trojan horse because if he is left unimpeded, he will do far more to destroy conservatism than save it. And I think this is actually the biggest thing that Delano Squires said in his rant. This is the biggest thing that I believe conservatives who are raising awareness about the faults of Andrew Tate actually have in terms of just a general point about him that I think is accurate, is that when you look at conservative politics generally, I think a lot of this, and Donald Trump is guilty of this, is what are we against? What can we destroy? Who are our enemies? And that's been something that Andrew Tate is really good at. He's really upset at the Matrix. He's really upset at the relations between men and women. He's really upset at the institution of marriage. He's really upset at, a lot of the, the world government globalists, all the nameless people that he names for some bizarre reason. And interestingly enough, that's kind of what this Donald Trump nationalist populist movement is as well. He talks about all of these vague terms. He talks about all of these things, and he kind of says, this is kind of how this goes. This is how that goes, all those things. And so, but the thing that I think is both an error of Trump, we're going to focus on Tate here, but an error of Tate is that name me one thing that Andrew Tate has said he's for. Nothing. Like, I can't find a single thing on the internet, and that was the point of Delano Squires. Andrew Tate does not build anything, and he builds up men, quote unquote. That's kind of his calling card. He's, join my Hustlers University, learn how to make money, learn how to attract women, whatever. Like, okay, fine. But that archetype that he's creating, that person he's creating, is not someone that I think should be admired or is going to be admired long-term by anybody. But because if you breed a lot of nihilistic, anti-marriage, anti-helping people out, anti-community-oriented men, it's not going to help anybody, including that person. And they're going to find out really late. And Andrew Tate has gotten rich off of it, which is a very, very, upsetting thing in many ways. And I think that is the reason and the trouble that conservative politics generally is going in. And I don't know if Tate is really a conservative. I think he's kind of maybe leveraging the MAGA agenda to kind of just give him a shield because of his legal troubles, which is exactly what, Ron DeSantis has said about him. Like, Tate is, I think, very, justifiably accused of being a pimp. He's run an OnlyFans agency. He's got multiple leaked videos out now about him very explicitly abusing women, all those type of things. And obviously everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But there's a lot of, smoke to that fire, at least at this point. And I'm not trying to throw, stones at anybody, but, Andrew Tate's given us a lot of ammunition. So therefore, I think it's probably justifiable that we throw some stones at least somewhat in his way because he has not done himself any favors in that department. So that's where the Gloria Steinem analogy. Gloria Steinem didn't build anything in feminism. Andrew Tate is not building anything with the real world, with the Matrix, with all these sorts of, banal and weird things that he's kind of doing right now. He's not building anything constructive. Instead, he's just ripping down, destroying, this person's to blame for this person's to blame for this, whatever. And he's just not doing anything that's going to help anybody long-term, particularly men long-term. These are not solutions that men should be gravitating to, but they're coming in the form of a guy with a big snake tattoo on his arm and a bunch of fancy cars and a bunch of hot women around him. And he does have kids, apparently, and, sunglasses and all these sorts of things. And so the bottom line is this. Conservative politics needs to be defined by what we are conserving. It can't be about breaking stuff all the time. And I'm a fan of breaking stuff. I just had my whole opening monologue about, I'm glad that Trump is breaking stuff. I'm glad that people are coming in and throwing out all of these people that are, villains to the everyday citizen, villains to the everyday person. And I'm glad that that's happening. But I think overall, what's happening is we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater a little bit too much here. We're doing a disservice to a lot of people by saying that at the end of the day, you really shouldn't have anything you're standing for. Well, you know what you're standing against. You know what your enemies are, but who are your heroes? Who are you holding up to people? Who are you valorizing? And that's really, really important to any movement, really. But I think that is the thing about Andrew Tate that a lot of people mistake, is that he's a Trojan horse that could ultimately destroy this whole thing that we're trying to build here with this kind of countercultural narrative. And what we're trying to build here at Value Economics, by the way. But this countercultural narrative, it's not enough just to be countercultural. You have to be cultural. You have to be for something. You have to create an ecosystem of things in order to build things properly and to get your message out to the right people who actually need it. And so that is the pushback to the Andrew Tate phenomenon, and also really why we shouldn't listen to celebrities in general. And I think that, Andrew Tate is nothing more than just kind of an influencer. Like, he's kind of like, I'm trying to think what the female equivalent of Andrew Tate would be. I'm not even sure at this point. I just know no female celebrities at this point. Like Alex Cooper, maybe. Actually, Alex Cooper is probably a pretty good example. So Tate is probably the female Alex Cooper in that way. And they probably hate each other. And there's a reason why they probably hate each other. But, is there really a difference between Andrew Tate and Alex Cooper? I don't think so. They preach the same message, just like the Gloria Steinem thing. They preach the same message, even though Alex Cooper is married, but she tells all of her followers to not be married and to, have sex with a bunch of men and, be unchained and be free and, go wild and all these sorts of things. And it's destructive, obviously. It's wrong, obviously. It's immoral, obviously. And, we just need to stop listening to these people.